So Labour are once again clamping down on democracy, which is standard practice for Starmer's Labour. Labour is proposing to scrap the duty for constituency Labour parties to have equalities officers on their executives and radically scale back the scope of policy debate at its annual conference. Labour conferences are pretty famous for their debates, and it's a way to show off how many activists and supporters Labour have. When you compare them to the Tories, you have young, diverse people in large numbers, whereas the Conservatives are all old and white, and there aren't many of them. Tory members are a dying breed. But basically, anything good that exists in the Labour Party is always a target for Keir Starmer. Now he wants to stamp his authoritarianism on the policy discussions across the party. But whilst trying to push through top-down rules, they can't help but still think about Jeremy Corbyn. Rule changes due to be voted on the party's National Executive Committee today also include closing a potential loophole for members to support rival candidates such as Jeremy Corbyn or Jamie Driscoll without facing expulsion. Now, the excuse for all of this is, well, it's simple Labour Party rules. You can't back non-Labour candidates, well, unless you're Luciana Berger, Angela Smith, Mike Gapes, and others who joins the widely successful Change UK or the Lib Dems. Now, Jamie Driscoll, as many of us know, is a well-respected mayor across all political lines. Many Tories have said that if there's one thing about Driscoll, is that he knows and cares about the community he serves. Of course, Driscoll was barred from standing as a candidate for the North East mayoralty simply for being left-wing. So for the local community and specifically Labour supporters, Labour have imposed a cardboard cutout of a typical politician that no one wants. So if you ask me, it's entirely understandable for Labour members to support people like Driscoll, who have been Labour for years. Same goes with Corbyn. He represented Islington North for 40 years and is literally a former Labour leader. But the party's modus operandi isn't to find the best candidates, but rather build an army of yes people to Keir Starmer. But this isn't the worst part of the proposed rule changes. This next bit is genuinely repulsive. A copy of planned changes seen by Labour List makes clear the party plans to scrap Corbyn-era rules that empowered CLPs to send more motions to conference and empowered their disability, black and minority ethnic, LGBT+, and youth officers. Later on in the Labour List article, it confirms that the requirement for executive officers to include LGBT+, BAME, disability and youth officers will be removed. The changes have sparked a backlash from campaign groups Momentum and Open Labour, but NEC member Luke Akehurst defended the plans. No surprise that Luke Newcombe supports these plans because he is a disgusting, deplorable human being. He doesn't just represent the worst parts of Labour, but the worst in politics today. These new motions will severely restrict the voices of minorities, queer, and disabled people. Under Corbyn, there were more people from diverse backgrounds because the membership swelled to over 500,000. That's what happens with more democracy. Think about it. 100 years ago, only privileged men could vote. Then it expanded to all classes, then to women. More restrictions on voting, such as voter ID. In the US, closing down of polling stations makes it harder for working class, people of colour, and disabled people to vote. This is what Labour is becoming. They want to be more white, more male, and more boring, rather than celebrate diversity of people, and diversity of ideas. When you attack democracy, that's the natural effect of it. We continue. CLPs and other affiliates are currently able to send motions for Labour's annual conference to debate on a wide range of issues. The proposed changes will see a reversion to pre-Corbyn rules that mean only contemporary motions can be submitted. Contemporary, that's interesting. So debating a bit of austerity or a lot of it then. The precise definition is not clear, but the pre-Corbyn rulebook has suggested contemporary motions were those not substantially addressed by reports of the NEC or National Policy Forum. The MPF considered Labour's position on a vast array of subjects, resulting in a huge document only published earlier this month, suggesting only a far narrower set of issues remain eligible for debate. So the NEC doesn't want to just restrict who debates policy, but they also want to restrict what the policies are. This essentially means narrowing the whole political debate. Conference will genuinely be like, okay, do we privatise 20% or 30% of the NHS? Let's discuss tuition fees, but the parameters are, do we increase them a little bit or by a lot? It speaks to the lack of confidence of Keir Starmer, and he acknowledges his ideas are unpopular. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to push through changes that turn once a mass party into a hard right clique. And it's just so funny how the Labour right and the media tried to paint Corbyn as some Stalinist. I mean, how many times did you hear people say that Corbyn wanted Labour to be a hard left clique? I mean, He literally tried to open up the party to more voices, and Starmer is currently trying to reverse all of it. And guess what? Not a peep from the media. A spokesperson for campaign group Momentum said, "These proposed changes represent yet another attack on the rights of Labour members from a Starmer leadership which is patently hostile to party democracy." True. They claimed the anti-democratic clique at the top of the party views members not as the lifeblood of the party, but as a problem to be managed. Also true. This is also interesting. Open Labour have attacked these moves, but they're hardly a left organisation, rather they're more on the centre. The co-chair, Amen Tesfaye, said, "A party that can't listen to its own members at conference seems far too fragile and uncertain for a party which is leading in the polls. Trying to turn conference into a happy-clappy performing seal show isn't the direction of a modern, vibrant democratic party." Now let's get to the best bit, which is Luke Akehurst's response. Since 2018, there's been a constitutional anomaly whereby the primary policy-making process for the Labour Party has been submissions to the NPF, National Policy Forum, but there seemed to be the possibility to short-circuit that process by having an old-fashioned, confrontational, motion-based debate at conference. That was something the party had moved on from in the late 90s. This rule change removes that constitutional anomaly because all stakeholders, including the leadership and unions, recognise how well the NPF process worked this year, and that should be the definitive route through which party makes policy. That's funny. So those with the most institutional power said it worked fine. What a coincidence. It's also ironic he mentions unions, since he and the current Lotto hate them. Obviously, if you ask the Labour bureaucracy what they thought about a system that only listened to them, they're obviously going to like it. The point about opening up the party is to give more power to activists and ordinary members. But Labour continued to show they hate democracy. They hate having diverse people and their opinions. They're a truly repulsive political party. They are trying to turn the clocks back to just having white men in suits govern society. I mean, women are allowed too, just as long as they're white and neoliberal. Make no mistake, this is long-term planning from the leadership. It's not just about keeping Labour a tight-knit clique to win the election. They are trying to remove diversity and democracy from the future of the Labour Party. They hate socialism so much, they are willing to silence black, brown, queer, and disabled people just in case they get any horrific ideas of a more equal society. Labour are truly repulsive.